The galaxy had long mistaken silence for peace. For 5 standard centuries, the consortium of sentience had presided over an era of unprecedented harmony, a great quietude built on the bedrock of total disarmament and open diplomacy. Warfare was a relic, a vulgarity studied by historians and shuddered at by schoolchildren. The consortium, a council of the galaxy's most enlightened species, from the crystalline Geth to the gaseous Solipsi, believed that any conflict could be unraveled with logic, any aggression soothed with understanding. They had traded their warships for trade hubs, their soldiers for philosophers, and they had grown fat and slow in their tranquility, believing the monsters of the void had been reasoned out of existence. But the void does not reason, and its oldest monsters were merely waiting. The first sign that the peace was a lie came not with a bang, but with a hush. It began at Cygnus X1, a vibrant listening post on the consortium's fringe, home to 1 million souls from a dozen species. One cycle, its communication arrays sang with a chorus of trade negotiations, scientific data, and familial greetings. The next, there was nothing. Not a distress call and not a burst of static, just a perfect, profound emptiness. The consortium, in its infinite wisdom, dispatched a survey cutter, expecting to find a cometary fragment had severed a primary relay. The cutter never reported back. It, too, joined the silence. That was when they sent for Kalen. He was a Xylosian, a species of frail, moth-like humanoids whose purpose in the galaxy was to remember. His people were the archivists, the chroniclers, the keepers of the great Galactic Codex. They did not fight. They did not build empires. They observed and recorded. Kalen's ship, the Stellograph, was less a vessel and more a floating library. Its corridors lined not with armor plating, but with humming data cores and cryogenic memory scrolls. He arrived at the edge of the Cygnus system to a scene of unnerving stillness. A dozen consortium ships, from freighters to the missing survey cutter, hung in the void like forgotten ornaments. Their lights on, their engines cold. There were no signs of battle, no debris fields, no energy signatures of weapons fire. Kalen's long-range scans showed life signs on every ship and on the station itself, stable and plentiful. They were all alive, yet no one answered his hails. Against the protest of his ship's logic engine, he took a shuttle and boarded the listening post. The air was breathable, the gravity normal, the emergency lights casting a serene blue glow over the silent corridors, and everywhere there were people. A Geth crystal tender stood frozen mid-polish, his multifaceted hand hovering over a shimmering data node. A trio of humanoid traders were seated around a table, their game of chance unfinished, their expressions placidly blank. A mother held her child in the main promenade, both staring forward with the same empty, untroubled eyes. They were all there, breathing, hearts beating, but their minds were gone. It was a world of statues, of beautiful, intricate shells from which the consciousness had been scooped clean. A cold, alien dread, an emotion his people had nearly forgotten, slithered up Kalen's spine. He was no soldier, but he recognized this was not a plague. It was a conquest of the most insidious kind. As he backed away, his foot bumped a fallen datapad. When he picked it up, its screen was a cascade of nonsensical, shifting patterns, a visual virus that seemed to writhe. But behind the chaos, he heard something, not with his auditory sensors, but in the core of his mind, a faint, layered whisper, a psychic resonance left behind like a footprint. It was a sound of immense, ancient hunger, the sound of 1 billion voices being subsumed into one. He fled, the whisper echoing in his thoughts, and pushed the stellograph to its limits. leaving the silent system behind him. His report to the consortium was met with skepticism and clinical disbelief. They formed a committee. They commissioned studies on mass psychosis and previously unknown neuropathogens. The idea of a weapon that could erase sentience itself was dismissed as primitive fear-mongering. "The evidence is inconclusive," droned the Solipsi delegate, its gaseous form swirling calmly. "Violence is illogical. An enemy who leaves resources and populations intact is a contradiction." Kalen's pleas grew more desperate as two more systems on the fringe went silent, the pattern of emptiness spreading like a stain. He knew the consortium would debate and analyze until their own world fell quiet. He had one last, desperate hope. In the most forbidden sections of the Xylosian archives, under classifications of myth, heresy, and existential threat, were the records of humanity. They were the outliers, the galactic pariahs. Centuries ago, when the consortium was formed and the Great Disarmament was decreed, humanity had refused. They called the consortium's philosophy a suicide pact and argued that to be peaceful, one must first be capable of incredible violence. When the consortium insisted, the humans did not argue or plead. They simply vanished. They recalled their ambassadors, scuttled their colonial outposts, and retreated behind an impenetrable wall of silence in their home system as Isopondensol. The official consortium record labeled them a failed, petulant race that had likely collapsed into internal conflict. But the Xylosian secret archives told a different story. They whispered of a species that had stared into the void and seen the things lurking there. A species that had chosen to become monsters to fight monsters. They were the only ones who had never forgotten how to hate, how to fear, and how to kill. Navigating to the Sol system was a crime punishable by exile, but Kalen was already an outcast. He plotted a course through unmapped dark space, his small archivist vessel groaning under the strain. The journey felt like a descent into some forgotten hell, a place of cold, dead stars and gravitational anomalies the consortium chart simply marked as "Here be dragons." When he finally emerged into the light of a yellow star, the Sol system was nothing like the myths. There were no grand fleets, no bustling orbital rings. There was only Mars, a world encased in a web of shipyards that crawled across its red surface, building things of stark, brutalist design. And there was Earth, a blue and white marble, orbited by a single, colossal space station that bristled with more weaponry than Kalen had seen in his entire life. Before his sensors could even process the readings, his ship was seized. Not with a tractor beam, but with a swarm of grappling claws that fired from a sleek, shark-like vessel that had decloaked directly in front of him. It was a ship painted in matte black, with a severe, angular design that was an affront to the consortium's elegant, curved aesthetics. There were no greetings, no warnings. His screens went red with intrusion alerts, his controls locked, and a voice, cold and flat as the void itself, spoke through his comms in perfect, unaccented consortium standard. "You are trespassing in sovereign human territory. Do not attempt to resist. We will be boarding." The voice was female, laced with an authority that felt ancient and absolute. Moments later, the Stellagraph's airlock hissed open, and they came aboard. They were not the hulking brutes of legend. They were men and women in form-fitting, non-reflective black armor, their faces obscured by helmets that showed no features. They moved with a predatory grace, their weapons held at a low ready, sweeping through his ship with chilling efficiency. One of them, taller than the others, removed her helmet. Her face was sharp and severe, with pale skin, dark hair pulled back in a tight bun, and eyes the color of a winter storm. Scars, thin and white, traced a map of old violence across her jawline. This was Marshal Eva Rostova, commander of the patrol ship Quietus and guardian of humanity's self-imposed prison. A Xylosian, she said, her voice the same one from the comms. She looked around the library ship with something between pity and contempt. A long way from home. Archivist. The consortium doesn't allow its pets to wander this far off the leash. Kalen, his frail body trembling slightly, held up his hands in a gesture of peace. I come on my own authority. Marshal, I am here because the galaxy is in danger. Rostova let out a short, humorless laugh. The galaxy is always in danger. That is its natural state. You lot just decided to forget that. That is not our concern. We honored the quarantine. We left you to your philosophical debates and your inevitable decay. Now you will leave us to our solitude. She began to turn away, her interest already fading. Desperate, Kalen surged forward. A new enemy has emerged. It doesn't kill. It consumes. It erases minds. Marshal, entire worlds have gone silent. The consortium is blind. But your people chose to remember what true war is. I am begging you. He held out the data pad he had recovered from Cygnus X1. I have a recording, a psychic echo of its presence. One of the armored soldiers next to Rostova instinctively raised his rifle, but she waved him down. Her cold eyes settled on the data pad, a flicker of curiosity warring with her ingrained disdain. Psychic warfare, a primitive but effective terror tactic, she mused. Show me. Kalen activated the device. The screen filled with the same writhing, chaotic patterns, and the whisper filled the bridge of the stellograph. It was a sound of pure entropy, of consciousness being unmade, a sound that promised not oblivion, but an eternity of empty servitude. Most of the human soldiers stood impassive, their training holding firm, but one of the younger ones, standing near the back, stiffened. He let out a choked gasp, and a single, thick drop of blood fell from his nose, splattering on the pristine deck. Rostova's head snapped toward the sound. Her eyes, which had been dismissive and bored, were now flinty and dangerously sharp. She strode over to Kalen, snatching the datapad from his hand. Her gaze was no longer on him, but on the shifting patterns, and for the first time, her voice lost its iron control, replaced by a low, venomous intensity that was far more terrifying. That is not a psychic echo, she hissed, her knuckles white as she gripped the device. It's a hive signature. We called it the static. We fought it 1,000 years ago. We thought we had burned every last trace of it from existence. She looked up at Kalen, and in her eyes, he did not see the savior he had been looking for. He saw an executioner who had just learned that a plague she thought long dead had just been found festering in her neighbor's house. You foolish, arrogant children, she whispered, the words dripping with a chilling fury. What have you woken up? Marshal Rostova did not offer Kalen comfort. She offered him a command. Secure the archivist, she snapped, her voice cutting through the lingering psychic chill on the stellograph's bridge. Strip his vessel's data cores, every last one. Scuttle the ship. I want nothing left of it but drifting atoms. This system is now under a level Omega quarantine. Her soldiers moved with the synchronized precision of a single organism. Kalen was flanked, his arms gently but inexorably pinned as one soldier fitted a metallic collar around his slender neck. It was cold and heavy, a slave shackle in the language of the consortium, but he understood it was merely a tool here, as impersonal as a weapons safety lock. He was no longer a diplomat or a seeker of aid. He was a contamination vector and a piece of evidence. As they escorted him off his beloved ship, the last he saw of the Stellograph was a team of human engineers methodically planting demolition charges along its spine. They worked without malice, their movements economical and final. There was no room for sentiment in this new, cold reality. The journey aboard the Quietus was short and silent. Kalen was placed in a small, bare room that he supposed was a brig, though it had no bars, only a single seamless wall that became transparent or opaque at his captor's will. Through it, he watched as they approached Earth. The planet was a fortress, the colossal orbital station, which Rostova's crew called the Aegis, was the system's primary gatekeeper. It was a latticework of gunmetal gray structures, a city-sized web of railgun emplacements, missile batteries, and shimmering energy shields that flickered with contained power. Hundreds of ships like the Quietus, sleek and predatory, patrolled in intricate, overlapping patterns. There was no civilian traffic, no gaudy commercial vessels, only the ceaseless, vigilant dance of warships. This was not a home. It was a garrison, a species living on a permanent war footing. They docked within the Aegis, the interior of which was a cavernous, echoing space filled with the clang of industry and the sharp orders of officers. Kalen, now escorted by 4 guards, was marched through corridors that were more like canyons, vast and utilitarian. Everywhere, he saw humanity in motion, clad in the same severe black uniforms or gray work fatigues. Their faces were a mask of focused intensity. They did not laugh. They did not linger. They moved with a purpose that bordered on the fanatical. He was brought before the leaders of this strange martial civilization in a room at the heart of the station, and they called the Sanctum. It was not a throne room or a council chamber, but a circular command deck. The walls were a 360-degree screen showing star charts, fleet dispositions, and streams of intelligence data flowing too fast for him to comprehend. In the center stood 3 figures. On the left was a man whose body was a testament to a long and brutal history. General Jericho Thorne was old, his face a roadmap of scars, one eye replaced by a dull red optical sensor. His uniform was immaculate, but he stood as if the weight of 1,000 battles rested on his broad shoulders. On the right was a woman, slighter than the general but radiating a cold, intellectual menace. Director Eris Thorne, the general's younger sister, was head of internal security and psychological warfare. Her eyes, a startlingly pale gray, seemed to dissect Kalen, looking not at him, but through him, into the architecture of his thoughts. Between them stood a man who wore no uniform, only simple black robes. He was the speaker, Valerius, the civilian head of their government, though Kalen suspected the term civilian was a loose one here. His face was unreadable, his calm a deep and unsettling ocean. Rostova stood at attention before them. Speaker, General, Director, I present Kalen of the Xylosian Archivists. He breached the quarantine zone bearing this. She placed the datapad on the central holotable. The writhing patterns of the static filled the room, and with them came the faint, insidious whisper. General Thorne's cybernetic eye whirred as it focused on the signal. The signature is confirmed, he growled, his voice like grinding stone. Degraded but unmistakable. Director Thorne's gaze never left Kalen. Tell us everything, she commanded. It was not a request. Her voice was soft, yet it carried an unnerving authority, a subtle pressure that seemed to loosen his own will. Kalen recounted his journey, the silent station at Cygnus X1, the empty-eyed populace, the consortium's disbelief. He spoke of the spreading silence, of his desperate search through the forbidden archives, and of his hope that humanity, the galaxy's forgotten warriors, might hold the key to survival. When he finished, the room was silent for a long moment. It was Valerius who finally spoke, his voice measured and devoid of emotion. "You did not come seeking saviors, archivist. You came knocking on the door of an asylum, begging its inmates to be set loose upon the world. The static is not a conventional enemy." General Thorne elaborated, his scarred face grim. "It doesn't conquer territory, it conquers consciousness. Those people you saw are not empty shell, they are hosts. Their brains have been repurposed into biological processing nodes for the hive mind. They are the enemy now, living weapons and sensor platforms. The silence is not an absence of life. It is the sound of the hive mind expanding its computational power." Kalen felt a wave of nausea. A million souls on Cygnus X1 not dead, but enslaved. Their very thoughts fuel for a cosmic predator. Then, they can be saved. Their minds can be restored. Director Thorne gave a thin, pitying smile. "Hope is a luxury we discarded long ago. Consciousness, once unwritten, cannot be rewritten. There is no cure. There is only excision." "What you have woken up, archivist," Valerius said, stepping forward, "is a ghost. After our last war with the static, our ancestors pursued it to the edge of the known galaxy. They believed they had destroyed its central intelligence, its overmind, at the cost of our most advanced fleets and a quarter of our population. We did not vanish from the galaxy by choice. We retreated to lick our wounds and to stand guard, a guard the consortium deemed unnecessary. We enacted the Great Silence," the general continued. "We turned our civilization inward, transforming it into a weapon, a single-purpose organism designed to do one thing: hunt and kill the static should it ever return. Every human is born a soldier. We train from birth. We study the static's logic, its methods, its psychic frequencies. We are the antibody to its plague." Kalen stared at them, a horrifying understanding dawning in his mind. He had thought humanity was a race of paranoid isolationists. He now saw they were a race of traumatized sentinels, standing a lonely, centuries-long watch over a grave they had mistakenly believed was full. "You knew it would come back," he whispered. "We knew that a single spore could regrow the forest." Director Thorne corrected. "And your consortium, with its open borders, its endless curiosity, and its philosophical refusal to acknowledge pure malice, was the perfect petri dish." General Thorne turned to a massive display on the wall. A map of the galaxy glowed there, the silent systems marked in a creeping, sickly red. "The initial infection vectors are too widespread. Containment is no longer a viable strategy." "Then what will you do?" Kalen asked, his voice trembling. The general looked at him, his one good eye filled with a terrible, ancient weariness. "We will do what we were built to do. We will honor our ancestors' sacrifice. Speaker, I request authorization to activate the Scythe Protocol." Valerius nodded slowly. "Authorization granted. May history forgive us for what we are about to unleash." He then turned his gaze to Kalen. "You will be our witness, archivist. You came here for knowledge. You will now have it. You will see what is necessary to survive in a galaxy that has forgotten how to fight." Alarms began to sound across the Aegis, not frantic or panicked, but a deep, resonant tone, like the tolling of a great bell. On the main screen, the general issued a single command: awaken the Winter Fleet. In the dark, cold spaces behind Mars and in the depths of the Kuiper Belt, dormant systems flared to life. Colossal shipyard gantries, silent for centuries, began to move, peeling back the stealth plating from ships that dwarfed the Aegis. These were not the sleek patrol cutters Kalen had seen. These were behemoths, vessels of pure warfare, their hulls thick with armor and scarred with the memory of a forgotten war. Their names appeared on the tactical display: Stark and Brutal Iron Resolve, Final Reckoning, Grave Warden. Marshal Rostova and the crew of the Quietus were reassigned. Their new vessel was a Scythe-class destroyer, the Harbinger. Kalen was brought to its bridge, a prisoner observer, the collar on his neck a constant reminder of his new status. The bridge was a place of focused, lethal calm. Rostova stood at its center, her face illuminated by the cold light of the tactical displays. She was no longer just a soldier. She was an instrument of a terrible, righteous fury. "Set a course for the Cygnus system," she commanded, her voice steady. "Our orders are to enforce the Scythe Protocol. No negotiations, no rescue attempts, no survivors. We are not here to save them. We are here to grant them the mercy of a clean death." Kalen watched in horror as a fleet of black, angular warships assembled in Earth's orbit, a swarm of vengeance ready to be unleashed. He had come to find a sword to fight the darkness, and he had been given one. But as he looked at the cold, determined face of Eva Rostova and the fleet gathering around them, a chilling question took root in his mind. Once this sword had scoured the static from the galaxy, who would be left to sheathe it? He had sought saviors and had found exterminators, and he was now trapped on the blade's edge as it swung toward the heart of the galaxy he had tried to save. The journey through the void was a study in disciplined silence. On the bridge of the Harbinger, there was no idle chatter, no camaraderie that Kalen had observed on consortium vessels. There was only the low thrum of the Singularity Core and the crisp, clipped exchange of tactical data. Marshal Rostova stood like a statue of iron at the command dais, her gaze fixed on the star-dusted screen before them, her expression a mask of cold anticipation. Kalen, confined to an observer station near the back, felt like a ghost haunting his own future. He watched the crew, men and women who moved with the fluid economy of lifelong soldiers, their faces young but their eyes ancient. They were the product of a civilization that had sacrificed its soul for a shield, and now they were preparing to use that shield as a club. He tried to engage one of them, a young ensign monitoring the ship's resonance sinks, devices Kalen did not recognize. "What is your function?" he asked, his voice soft, a fragile thing in the metallic air. The ensign didn't turn, his eyes locked on his console. "I ensure the Marshal's thoughts remain her own, Archivist, and that yours do not become ours." The answer was a wall, and Kalen understood. Privacy, individuality, these were not rights here, but tactical assets to be guarded. Even their minds were weapons, and fraternizing with a potential psychic contaminant was a breach of protocol. The fleet did not use conventional faster-than-light travel. They moved through what they called the Underverse, a dimension of compressed space-time that consortium science had deemed too volatile to navigate. The human ships, however, plunged into it with brutal confidence, their hulls coated in a strange, non-reflective material that seemed to drink the chaotic energies of the realm. The transit was jarring, a sensation not of movement, but of being violently remade from one moment to the next. Then, just as suddenly, they were spat back into real space, and the Cygnus system lay before them. It was exactly as Kalen had left it, a graveyard of silent, powered-down ships orbiting the ghost station. But the humans saw it differently. "The static is lazy," Rostova announced, her voice resonating through the bridge. "It prefers ambush to open confrontation. It assumes we are like you. Consortium, curious, eager to investigate, to rescue." She pointed a gloved finger at the main view screen. "Ensign, deploy the tuning forks. Tactical, prepare the resonance cascade. I want a full psychic survey before we commit." From the belly of the Harbinger and its sister ships, long, slender drones were launched. They didn't have engines or weapons. They were matte black spires that arranged themselves in a complex geometric pattern around the silent station. "What are those?" Kalen couldn't help but ask. Rostova glanced back at him, a flicker of what might have been condescending pity in her storm-gray eyes. "The static's hive mind is a psychic chorus. Archivist, a billion stolen voices screaming in unison. To a non-telepathic species, it is a whisper. To a trained mind, it is a weapon. Those drones are our ears. They will listen to the song of the hive, and they will teach us how to sing it back, but out of tune." As she spoke, the drones began to hum, emitting a low, discordant frequency that vibrated through the hull of the Harbinger. On the tactical display, a new layer of information appeared, a ghostly, shimmering web of light that connected every silent ship and the station itself. At its center, within the station's core, pulsed a single, malignant point of brilliance. "There you are," Rostova whispered. "A primary synapse, a nexus. It has already converted a local mind, someone with latent psychic potential, into a command node." The moment the resonance cascade began, the trap was sprung. The lights on the dozen consortium freighters and the survey cutter flickered to life. Their engines flared, their maneuvering thrusters fired. They turned to face the human fleet. It was a grotesque parody of a naval formation, clumsy and uncoordinated. They were puppets, their dead hands guided by the will of the synapse. "They're using the ships," Kalen breathed in horror. "And the crews. Flesh and steel are just resources to the hive," Rostova said, her voice devoid of any emotion. "Weapons officer, target their drive systems. Disable. Do not destroy. I want them immobile." The Harbinger's forward cannons fired. They were not plasma bolts or laser beams, but lances of pure kinetic force, hyper-accelerated slugs of tungsten that struck with surgical precision. One after another, the engines of the consortium ships were shattered, their momentum arrested. They were left crippled and adrift, their lights still blazing defiantly. The static was learning. It had expected a cautious approach, a boarding party. It had not expected this cold, immediate, and overwhelming violence. A wave of pure psychic rage emanated from the station, a silent scream that made the younger ensigns on the bridge flinch. Blood trickled from the nose of the one Kalen had spoken to earlier. He wiped it away with the back of his glove, his face a mask of stoic concentration. Rostova was unfazed. "The synapse is agitated. It's diverting processing power to offense. Its hold on the peripheral hosts will be weakening. Now is the time. General Thorne," she said, addressing the fleet command channel, "the system is prepped for sterilization. I am initiating the final phase of the Scythe protocol." Kalen felt a cold dread seize him. "Sterilization? What does that mean? You've disabled them. The people on those ships are still alive. Their bodies are..." "Archivist," Rostova corrected him, turning to face him fully. Her eyes were chips of ice. "Their minds, their souls, whatever you wish to call the spark of self, are gone. They were consumed to feed the hive. What remains is a cancer. And the only cure for cancer is to burn it out, root and stem, so that it can never grow back. This is the mercy we offer them. An end to their violation. She turned back to the tactical display. All ships, deploy Grey Tempest charges. Target the station and all disabled vessels. Saturation protocols. Leave nothing. From launch bays across the Winter Fleet, a new kind of weapon was released. They were not missiles, but pods that drifted slowly toward their targets. As Kalen watched, frozen in disbelief, the first pod reached a crippled freighter. It did not explode. It opened like a grotesque flower, releasing a shimmering, silver-gray cloud. The cloud enveloped the ship, and the vessel simply dissolved. There was no fire, no explosion. The metal, the crew, the very air inside the ship unraveled into a mist of constituent atoms, a cloud of fundamental particles that was then consumed by the advancing gray fog. One by one, the ships vanished, erased from existence as if they had never been. Kalen fell to his knees, a strangled cry escaping his throat. He was a Xylosian. His entire race was dedicated to the act of remembering, to preserving the history of every life, every culture, every moment. He was witnessing the ultimate blasphemy, the deliberate, systematic, and perfect act of erasure. This was not war, it was cosmic housekeeping. The fleet then focused its attention on the listening post. Dozens of Grey Tempest clouds converged, merging into a single, roiling storm that descended upon the station. Just before it was consumed, the synapse unleashed its death cry. It was not a scream this time, but a focused psychic lance aimed directly at the Harbinger. The bridge lights shattered, alarms blared. Every human on the bridge, save one, cried out, clutching their heads as blood streamed from their eyes and ears. The psychic assault was a torrent of stolen memories, the final agony of every mind consumed by the hive, a billion lifetimes of pain and terror concentrated into a single, mind-shattering moment. Kalen felt it too, a brush against his own consciousness that sent him reeling, the whispers of the damned echoing in his soul. Only Rostova remained standing, her back ramrod straight, her jaw clenched so tight it seemed her teeth might crack. A thin line of blood escaped one corner of her mouth, but her eyes were clear, burning with a cold, unholy light. She had weathered the storm, her will an unbreakable fortress against the psychic tide. "It's gone," the tactical officer gasped, his face pale as he struggled back to his feet. "The synapse has been neutralized. The station is gone." Kalen looked at the view screen. Where the station had been, there was only the black of space, the field of stars behind it unobscured. The Grey Tempest had done its work and dissipated, leaving nothing behind, not even dust. Cygnus X1 was now truly and forever silent. "Report," Rostova commanded, her voice strained but unbroken. "Casualties. Minor neural trauma across the fleet. Marshal. No fatalities. All crews will recover." "Good." She wiped the blood from her lip with the back of her thumb. "The static knows we are here now. The element of surprise is gone." As if to punctuate her words, a priority message flashed on the main screen, transmitted from the Aegis in the Sol system. It was the galactic map, the red stain of the static's influence, which had been creeping slowly from the fringe, had just made a leap. A new, pulsing crimson blotch had appeared, not on the edge of consortium space, but deep within its core, in the Tau Ceti sector, one of the most populous and prestigious regions of the galaxy. It had not just expanded, it had jumped, a strategic move that bypassed 100 systems. Rostova stared at the map, her hard-won victory turning to ash in her mouth. "It was a feint," she said, her voice a low, dangerous growl. "Cygnus wasn't an infestation. It was a listening post. It was watching us. It used our attack to analyze our tactics, our weapons, our response time." She looked at Kalen, and for the first time, he saw something in her eyes that was not contempt or fury, but a sliver of something that looked like fear. "It learned from us," she whispered, "and now it is taking the war to the heart of your unprepared, unsuspecting galaxy." The silence on the bridge of the Harbinger was no longer disciplined. It was heavy, suffocating. The hollow victory at Cygnus X1 had been replaced by the chilling certainty that they were outmaneuvered. Rostova stood before the tactical map, the red stain of Tau Ceti pulsing like a fresh wound in the heart of the galaxy. She replayed the static's jump, the impossible leap across 100 systems, over and over. It wasn't random. It was calculated. It was the move of a grandmaster, not a mindless plague. This enemy was not just awake. It was intelligent, patient, and it had used humanity's own predictable, brutal efficiency against them. Kalen watched her, the horror of the gray tempest still a fresh scar on his soul. He had seen the ultimate expression of human warfare, and it had been as absolute and terrifying as the static's consumption. They were two apocalyptic forces, one devouring consciousness, the other erasing existence. He felt trapped between two different flavors of the end of the world. He could not remain a mere witness, a chronicler of the apocalypse. That was the old Kalen, the servant of a galaxy that no longer existed. He approached his observer station and began to work, his slender fingers flying across the console, accessing the raw data from the tuning forks at Cygnus. He would not let those billion stolen memories be for nothing. He would dissect their final scream, searching for a pattern, a weakness, a single discordant note in the hive's perfect, terrible song. As the Winter Fleet tore through the underverse toward the galactic core, a new alarm cut through the tension. "Proximity alert. Multiple contacts. Dropping into real space," the tactical officer announced, his voice tight. "Consortium energy signatures. They're hailing us." The fleet emerged into the bright, star-dense space of the Tau Ceti sector, and a blockade was waiting for to horn them. It was a pathetic sight. A dozen consortium patrol cruisers, elegant ships with sweeping lines and decorative lights, built for parades and policing trade disputes. They were hopelessly outgunned, fragile glass sculptures facing a fleet of iron hammers. A face appeared on the main view screen. It was a Geth, his crystalline form shimmering with indignant light. "Unidentified fleet." The Geth's synthesized voice crackled with authority. "You are in violation of Consortium Accords 3, 7, and 12. You are armed for planetary assault, a Class A transgression. Power down your weapons and prepare to be boarded, or you will be fired upon." Rostova's lip curled in a sneer of pure contempt. "They brought picket fences to a wildfire. Open a channel." Her image appeared before the Geth commander. "This is Marshal Rostova of the Human Systems Defense Force. Your accords are irrelevant. Your space is compromised by a hostile entity designated the Static. We are here to contain the infection. Stand down, or you will be removed." "We have detected no such entity," the Geth retorted. "Tau Ceti Prime is secure and broadcasting normally. We see only you, a fleet of illegal warships from a rogue, primitive race. You will be the ones who are contained." The standoff was a perfect, tragic summary of the last 500 years. The Consortium, armed with laws and ideals, confronting a reality that cared for neither. Marshal, the weapons officer said. They are charging their primary cannons. Of course they are, Rostova muttered. They would rather die by the rules than live by breaking them. Target their command ship. Fire one warning shot. A kinetic lance, proximity detonation, rattle their crystals. Wait, Kalen cried out, stepping forward from his station, his heart pounding. Don't fire. Let me speak to them. Rostova's cold eyes swiveled to him. You are a contaminated asset. Archivist. You have no authority here. I am a Xylosian archivist, Kalen insisted, his voice gaining a strength he didn't know he possessed. They will recognize my neutrality. They believe you are conquerors. They have no context for what is happening. Firing on them will only prove them right. Let me be the context. For a long moment, Rostova studied him, her gaze weighing his desperate plea against centuries of ingrained military doctrine. To her, the consortium ships were just another obstacle, a complication to be swept aside. But Kalen's argument held a cold, tactical logic. A war on two fronts was inefficient. You have 60 seconds. Archivist, she said, her voice like chipping ice. Convince them to live. Kalen's face replaced Rostova's on the Geth Commander screen. Commander, this is Kalen, Codex Keeper, Registry Prime. I was at Cygnus X1. I am the one who brought this warning from the void. The Geth's indignant light softened to a glow of confusion. He recognized the authority in Kalen's title. Archivist, what is the meaning of this? Why are you with these primitives? Because they are the only ones who listened, Kalen pleaded. The static is here. It is not silent this time. It has learned deception. It is wearing the face of your people, speaking with their voices to lure you into the trap. As he spoke, the Harbinger's deep-range sensors finalized their analysis of Tau Ceti Prime. Rostova's eyes widened slightly as she read the data. Put it on the main screen, she ordered. The view switched to a planetary feed. Tau Ceti Prime was a jewel, a world of sprawling, beautiful cities and lush green continents. Its communication grid was fully active. Kalen could hear it now, trade requests, diplomatic greetings, messages of reassurance telling the rest of the galaxy that all was well. It was the calm, measured voice of a civilization at peace. But underneath it, woven into the very fabric of the transmissions, was the whisper, faint, subtle, but unmistakable, the psychic signature of the hive, humming its song of conquest beneath a veneer of normality. They are broadcasting a lie, Kalen said to the Geth commander, his voice breaking. The planet has already fallen. The Geth refused to believe it. It was impossible, illogical, and then the static made its first mistake, or perhaps its first calculated display of power. From the surface of Tau Ceti Prime, the planetary defense grid, a network of powerful orbital cannons, swiveled, not toward the human fleet, but toward the consortium blockade. Before the Geth commander could even process the threat, the cannons fired. Beams of brilliant energy, the planet's own defensive weapons, lanced out and struck the Geth's flagship, the elegant vessel, never designed for such a blow, shattered, its crystalline hull exploding into a billion glittering shards of light and silence. The illusion was broken. The truth was laid bare in a single, brutal act of self-destruction. The remaining consortium ships scattered, their commanders' confident pronouncements replaced by panicked, incoherent shrieks. Rostova watched without a flicker of emotion. The static grows bold, she said. It no longer feels the need to hide. Tactical. What is the estimated host population of the planet? 12 billion. Marshall, 12 billion. Not a million souls on a remote outpost, but a core world, a beacon of consortium culture. Kalen's mind recoiled from the number. The thought of the gray tempest descending on a world so full of life was an obscenity beyond comprehension. "You can't," he whispered, turning to Rostova. "You cannot erase 12 billion lives." "I can, and I will," she replied, her voice flat. "It is the only certain way. We cut out the infection, and we cauterize the wound. This is how we survived. There has to be another way." "There is no other way," she snapped, her voice finally cracking with a flash of raw, savage emotion. She took a step toward him, her eyes blazing with a fire that seemed to burn from the past. "My ancestors stood on the bridge of our last great arc, the Stardust, and they hoped for another way. They tried to reason with the static, to sever its connection to the hosts without harming them. The static used their hope against them. It wore the faces of their children, spoke with the voices of their wives and husbands, begging them to come closer. And when they did, it consumed them all. Hope is the disease. Archivist. Certainty is the cure. My certainty is that if I deploy the Tempest, the threat ends here. Your hope is a gamble with the fate of the entire galaxy." Her words struck Kalen like a physical blow. He finally understood. This wasn't just doctrine for her, it was dogma, paid for in the blood of her ancestors. Humanity hadn't just retreated, they had been broken, decimated, and had rebuilt their entire civilization on the foundation of that one. Terrible lesson, never hope. But Kalen was an archivist. His life was the study of patterns, and as he stared at the tactical display, at the malevolent hum of the hive's psychic signal, an idea, a desperate, impossible hope, began to form. "You're wrong," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "You see the static as a single entity, a cancer, but I am an archivist of information, and the static is information. At Cygnus, the signal was raw, chaotic, a simple command and control chorus, but here, it's different. It's layered, complex. It is broadcasting a sophisticated deception while simultaneously controlling 12 billion hosts. That requires immense processing power. Marshall, more than a distributed network can handle efficiently. It must have a central nexus, a primary node, far more powerful than the synapse at Cygnus. Not just a brain, but a heart." Rostova stared at him, her fury slowly being replaced by a grudging curiosity. "A surgical strike. You are proposing we attempt to decapitate the hive mind on the planet?" "Yes," Kalen affirmed. "The Gray Tempest is absolute, but it's a blunt instrument. If we can locate and destroy this primary node, we might sever the entire planet's population from the hive mind in a single blow. It wouldn't save them. Their minds are already gone, but it would neutralize them as a threat without the erasure. The risk is unacceptable," she countered. "The node would be the most heavily defended point on the planet, and we have no way of knowing where it is." "But I do," Kalen said, turning back to his console, where the whisper of the hive was visualized as a complex, swirling vortex of light. "You hear the hive song as noise, but I am a keeper of records, a librarian of patterns. I can read it. I can follow the threads of its logic, trace the flow of its data, and find the place where all its voices converge. I can find its heart." He looked up at her, his frail archivist's body filled with a terrifying, newfound resolve. "You have the sword, Marshal, but I have the map. Let me guide your hand." The bridge was silent. The remnants of the consortium fleet hung in space, shocked and leaderless. The infected planet of Tau Ceti Prime waited below, a beautiful poison jewel. Rostova looked from Kalen's determined face to the 12 billion souls she was prepared to extinguish. For the first time in centuries, a human commander was faced with a choice that was not based on the cold, hard certainty of their painful past, but on the fragile, illogical hope of an alien archivist. "Give me the map, archivist," she said, her voice a low growl of reluctant consent, "and pray to your forgotten gods that you are right." The bridge of the Harbinger transformed from a war room into a surgeon's theater. Kalen was its nerve center. He stood at his console, eyes closed, his frail Xylosian body rigid with concentration. He had plunged his consciousness into the torrent of the static's psychic broadcast, a feat that would have shattered any untrained mind. To him, it was not chaos, but a library of stolen lives, a cacophony he was meticulously cataloging. He sifted through the noise, ignoring the screams of the recently consumed and the layered lies of the broadcast, searching for the currents, the invisible streams of command and control that flowed beneath the surface. He was not a warrior, but an information theorist, and he was mapping the architecture of his enemy's mind. The human crew watched him with a mixture of awe and deep-seated suspicion. To them, he was an alien mystic performing an arcane ritual, yet their cold logic dictated that his bizarre method was their only alternative to planetary annihilation. "I have it," Kalen finally gasped, his eyes snapping open. They were bloodshot, and a single tear traced a path through the dust on his cheek, a tear for the 12 billion souls he had just communed with. He projected his findings onto the main holotable. It was not a map of the planet's surface, but a glowing, three-dimensional web of psychic energy. "It is not a fortress or a bunker," he explained, his voice hoarse. "The static is poetic in its cruelty. The primary node is located in the planetary capital, Tira's Rest, at the heart of the Grand Athenaeum. It has made its brain in the single largest repository of independent thought in the sector." The irony was as cold as the void. The static had nested in a library, a place built to celebrate the very individuality it sought to erase. Rostova stared at the map, her face a mask of stone. A civilian center. Soft target. But it will have turned the city's populace into a living shield. She turned to her tactical officer. "Project attack vectors for a precision orbital strike." The officer worked for a moment before shaking his head. "Negative, Marshal. The Athenaeum structure is too dense, and it's surrounded by residential towers. The collateral damage from a kinetic lance would be planetary, and energy weapons would be diffused by the psychic field." "Then we go in," Rostova said, a finality in her tone that left no room for debate. "We will be the scalpel." She turned to Kalen. "I need you to guide us, archivist, not from here, but from the ground. Your mind will be our eyes." And the decision sent a ripple of shock through the bridge. A ground assault on an infected world was unprecedented. A maneuver so risky it bordered on suicide. But Kalen saw the grim logic. The Gray Tempest was a weapon of fear and certainty. This new plan, born of his desperate hope, required something more courage. The assault was a blur of controlled violence. A single human dropship, the Stiletto, detached from the Harbinger and plunged into the planet's atmosphere. It was a spear tip aimed at the heart of the hive. Kalen was on its small, cramped bridge, strapped into a comms chair. A helmet of strange human design fitted over his head. It linked his mind directly to Rostova's command unit. He was her navigator through the unseen world. As they descended, he could feel the static's awareness shift toward them, a great and malevolent eye turning in its socket. The city of Tira's Rest was beautiful and serene from above, but as they got closer, the horror became apparent. The streets were filled with people, all 12 billion of them, standing shoulder to shoulder, their faces turned to the sky, their eyes empty. They were a silent, unmoving army of flesh. "They know we're here," Kalen transmitted to Rostova over the neural link. "They are not attacking. They are waiting, daring us to fire on them. We won't." Rostova's thought echoed back, cold and determined. The stiletto did not slow. It dove straight toward the Grand Athenaeum, a magnificent structure of white marble and glass. As it neared, a section of the silent crowd moved. They climbed onto one another, forming living towers, walls of bodies that rose to block the dropship's path. It was a grotesque, silent defense. Rostova did not flinch. "Find me another way. There's a subterranean aqueduct system, 200 meters below the plaza," Kalen projected, pulling the information from the city's public schematics, a memory stolen from a city planner moments before his mind was erased. The stiletto fired a single, low-power plasma charge, blasting an entry point into the ground, and plunged into the darkness below, leaving the silent, waiting crowds behind. They landed in the echoing dark. The strike team consisted of only Rostova and 4 of her elite soldiers. The air was cold and damp. "Lead on, Archivist," she sub-vocalized. Guided by Kalen's psychic sight, they moved through the silent tunnels. He directed them through maintenance shafts and forgotten service corridors, bypassing pockets of hosts that stood waiting in the darkness like discarded dolls. He was a beacon in the storm of the hive's consciousness, and the node was the lighthouse he steered them toward. They emerged into the Athenaeum's lower archives. Rows upon rows of data scrolls and ancient books stood in perfect silence, and at the center of the grand reading room, they found it. The primary node was not a machine or a monster. It was a Geth, the same crystalline species as the Commander Rostova had faced in orbit. This one, however, was suspended in a cage of pulsing, organic-looking cables that had burrowed into its crystalline structure. Its body flickered with the captured light of a billion stolen thoughts. It was the synapse from Cygnus, but magnified a millionfold. This Geth had been a powerful telepath, a scholar of consciousness, and the static had warped its gift, turning it into the perfect psychic amplifier. "That is the heart," Kalen whispered into Rostova's mind. The moment they entered the room, the Geth's head turned toward them. The air grew thick, and a voice composed of 12 billion layered whispers spoke in their minds. "You are the past, an error, a species built on the flawed logic of the self. We are the future. We are unity. We offer you peace." "We've heard your offer," Rostova said aloud, raising her rifle. The 4 soldiers took up positions around her, but before they could fire, the thousands of hosts within the Athenaeum began to move. They poured down staircases and through doorways, a silent, inexorable tide of bodies. They did not attack. They simply walked forward, their sheer numbers a living wall to protect their new god. Rostova's soldiers were forced back, unable to fire on the unresisting wave of civilians. "You cannot win," the voice echoed. "To defeat us, you must become us. You must abandon your compassion." "She won't have to." Kalen's thought cut through the psychic noise, a single, clear note against the hive's roar. He focused his entire will, not on fighting the node, but on doing what he did best. He archived. He pulled on the memory of the Grey Tempest, the perfect and absolute erasure he had witnessed at Cygnus. He did not deploy it, but he showed it to the node. He projected the memory, the feeling of utter non-existence, of being unwritten from reality, directly into the heart of the hive mind. The static, a being of pure collection and preservation, recoiled from the concept of perfect oblivion. For a microsecond, its control wavered. The tide of hosts faltered. It was the only opening they would get. "Now, Marshal," Kaylin screamed in her mind. Rostova didn't hesitate. She fired a single, precisely aimed shot from her rifle. The round, a specialized armor-piercing slug, struck the Geth's crystalline body dead center. It did not explode. It simply shattered. The psychic scream of its dissolution was a shockwave of pure silence. Across the planet, 12 billion people, from the silent army in the Athenaeum to the crowds in the streets, collapsed in unison. The puppet strings had been cut. Their bodies were alive, but the consciousness that had animated them was gone, leaving behind only the profound emptiness Kaylin had first witnessed at Cygnus X1. The war for Tau Ceti Prime was over. Back on the Harbinger's Bridge, Kaylin and Rostova stood before the main view screen, looking down at the quiet planet. The human soldiers were rounding up the remnants of the Consortium fleet, offering medical aid and a grim, quiet explanation. "We did not save them," Kaylin said softly. The weight of the 12 billion empty bodies, a new chapter in his endless archive. "No," Rostova replied, her voice softer than he had ever heard it. "But we saved their memory. By not erasing them, we allow them to be remembered as they were. We preserved their truth, even in death. That is your victory, Archivist." "And what is your victory, Marshal?" Kaylin asked. She looked at him, her storm gray eyes holding a new, complex light. "I learned that there is a difference between a weapon and a tool. The Scythe Protocol is a weapon, to be used when all else fails. But today, you gave us a new tool. You gave us a choice." The galaxy did not fall silent. The static was still out there, a spore in the dark, and it would return. But something had changed. The first joint transmission from the human fleet and the surviving Consortium commander went out across all channels. It was not a declaration of war, nor a plea for peace. It was a warning and a new doctrine. It spoke of humanity's terrible certainty and the Consortium's rediscovered ingenuity. It spoke of a new path forward, a synthesis of the shield and the mind. Humanity had not come to conquer the galaxy, nor to save it. They had come to teach it how to fight again. And in Kaylin, the galaxy had found a way to teach humanity how to hope again. The long, lonely watch was over. A new, shared vigil had just begun,